Before I start, I want to just take a second here to once again congratulate the Reverend Dr. Sanford Groff. As many of you know by following the videos in St. Mark's Connected, Sanford defended his thesis on Thursday up at through Virginia Theological Seminary, and not surprisingly, he passed. So it's hard not to have everybody here present. I'm sure that if you were here, you would want to stand and give him a round of applause. So I'm going to give you a little round of applause and assume that you're going to do the same thing at home. It's great. We're all really proud of you, Sanford, and look forward to kind of hearing more about the dissertation and some of the things. As you know, over 5 years, he's studied really St. Mark's relationships between the church and the school communities, and it's pretty interesting stuff. So we look forward to hearing from him more and appreciate it. I also want to just quickly say thank you to the staff at St. Mark's. You know, we're all doing the best we can to stay connected to you and to honor our calls and the various ways in which we serve at St. Mark's. And so we're grateful to you, Daniel, and of course to you, Deacon Mimi, and to the staff that's not here that makes sure that this place really does kind of keep on chugging along even as we're all disparate. So please keep your staff and their families in your prayers as well. Lutheran pastor Bruce Modell tells the story of Margaret, a woman in her late 30s who had a family, a husband and 3 children, and cancer. She was diagnosed, had surgery, the radiation and the chemotherapy which followed wasted her. She was in and out of the hospital, and then she rebounded. The cancer was in retreat, the prognosis good. And then, as we all too often hear, it recurred. There were more surgeries, and it spread, and it was gruesome. Toward the end of another year, Margaret died. And Modell, who at the time was serving as a seminarian associate at Margaret's church, recalls his mentor, Pastor Hutch, standing with him as Modell prepares to write a sermon for Margaret's funeral. The young seminarian says to his seasoned mentor, "She sure put up a valiant fight." "Yes, she did," Pastor Hutch agrees. "But the cancer finally won." "Yes," says Modell. What do you mean, the cancer won?" Hutch asks, kind of sounding a bit indignant. It seems rather obvious to Modell. "She's dead. The cancer killed her. It won," he says. The pastor turns to Modell. "Well, where's the cancer now?" Now it was Modell's turn to sound indignant. "What do you mean, where's the cancer now? If it won, if it's victorious, where is it? That's all I want to know," Hutch answers. The seminarian looks around for a full minute or so before saying, "Well, it's in there. It's in the coffin with her." "Oh," the senior pastor says. "Is it dead or alive?" "Well, dead, of course. So in killing her, it killed itself." "Well, yes," Modell lamely answers. "And where's Margaret?" Hutch presses. "If you believe what you say you believe, pastor-to-be, where is she?" "Well, she's with God," Modell answers. "Dead or alive?" Hutch wants to know. "Alive," Modell confesses. "So who won?" "She did," Modell answers. "She did because Christ did." That is the sermon text for this funeral and any funeral. Hutch tells his seminarian, "Never forget what Jesus says. I am resurrection, and I am life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, I believe," responds the young seminarian to his seasoned mentor. who shakes his head. I know you do. I do too. So do I, my friends. I believe in resurrection and life. I believe that the God we know in Jesus Christ raises people from the dead as surely as the sun rises in the morning and sets in the evening. I trust God with my life, and I trust God with my death. Do you? Do you believe? This morning, as we gather at the tomb of Lazarus, Jesus asks the same question to each of us as he does to Lazarus' sister, Martha, who obviously is upset. She's upset at God for not saving her brother's life, upset at God for not responding to her request for help, and for not answering her prayers the way she wants. Upset at God that Lazarus is just too darn young to die. He'll never get married, never have children, never grow old with grandchildren sitting in his lap. Why didn't God do something? Why didn't God cure Lazarus? Why? She begs to know. Tears streaming down her cheeks as Jesus finally arrives to her little town of Bethany. Martha's upset. She's scared. She needs someone to blame for something that is out of her control. So she blames God. Out of the depths I have called to you, O Lord, she cries to Jesus. But you didn't answer my prayers. You could have saved him if only you'd have gotten here. It's your fault that Lazarus lost the battle for this life. His sickness wins. Well, truth be told, many of us are thinking the exact same thing this morning as we all stand alongside Martha at the tomb of Lazarus. We think, oh, God is sending COVID-19 to teach us a lesson, to correct our wayward ways, and to somehow get us back on track. God is sending a pandemic to punish the whole world. God is making us sick to clean out the sinners, to save the righteous. God is doing nothing but just sort of sitting on the sidelines, watching from afar our troubled and terrified world. God is just a false idol anyway, a figment of our own imagination, empty prayers to a God who does not exist. Only deep down in our hearts, you and I, we Christians who care enough to tune into a live stream service where no one can see you and no one will ever know whether you are worshiping right now or not, we're here because none of us believe any of that stuff to be true. We know how COVID-19 started with a bat and an animal in a market somewhere in China. We know how it spreads, and we know what to do to help mitigate its damage. We know that most of us are going to survive and that scientists one day will find a cure. And we know that God works through our human intelligence with wisdom and knowledge, opening for us new ways to see and hear, inviting us to trust God more deeply and embrace God more fully. We know that God is not the cause of sickness. God is the healer of sickness. But we forget because we fear what we cannot control. And fear separates us from God as surely as COVID-19 separates us from one another. We forget. We forget that God is for us and not against us. We forget that God is in the redemption business. God saves lives. God rescues lives. God restores lives. God heals lives. God sacrifices God's own self to save us in all ways. Always. God even pulls us out of the grave where death shrouds us in fear and anguish. Pulls us into God's own arms of everlasting love, where the gift of new life awaits our arrival. Isn't that why a cross? I mean, a cross is the Christian symbol for God's redeeming act of love. Only by traveling through that cross, through suffering and death, can we experience resurrection. So I'm going to remind you one more time this morning, and I guarantee you this will not be my last reminder, and this is not the first time you've ever heard me say this. God is love. God's nature is love. The Word of God becomes flesh in Jesus, so that the words we hear from Jesus are the words from God's own lips. The same breath of life that gives life to those old dead bones we know so much about in that reading from Ezekiel is the same breath of life that caused Lazarus forth from that tomb this morning. I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live, God says. Lazarus, come out. Unbind him and let him go, Jesus says into the darkness of that tomb. I am resurrection, and I am life, Jesus says to you and to me. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? And when we believe, when we make the conscious decision to trust the Word of God, Jesus, new life. New life returns to these old bones. New life returns to Lazarus. New life returns to Martha. New life returns to us this morning as we witness the death of death and the power of resurrection. Not even dying can stop God from loving us. We win because Christ won. Do you believe this? I pray that you do. It will change your life today, tomorrow, and forever. Amen.